In this Q&A episode, I tell you my ideal first round playoff matchup, my all-time defense's starting five, and my favorite TV show. Hey, what's up guys? Hope you're doing well. Yesterday I took some questions from Twitter and I'm going to answer some of them in today's video. I put some timestamps to the questions in the description below so that you can just move around a little bit and pick and choose what you want to listen to. Prime T-Mac versus Prime Kobe. We've tweeted about it before, but I'd like to see you elaborate. Yeah, so I think overall it has to be still Prime Kobe, and mainly it's the defense. Offensively, Prime T-Mac and Prime Kobe were pretty on par with each other, honestly. If you just look statistically at, let's say Kobe's 35 point per game season in 2006, was it? Versus T-Mac's season in Orlando when he averaged like 32 or 33 points per game. The numbers are pretty close, honestly. The eye test is pretty close too. Some would actually say that T-Mac was a better offensive scorer because he was more versatile. He was a better three-point shooter for a lot of his career, and he had a more... I think his offensive game developed more... His offensive game was more well developed at an earlier age than Kobe's. Kobe, I think, definitely took some time to get down a lot of the advanced offensive moves. Kobe learned a lot of that stuff after Shaq left, first of all. But I think T-Mac learned a wide variety of offensive moves very early into his career, which is really, really rare. Best Eminem album. Honestly, this is a very unpopular answer. I think most Eminem fans would say Marshall Mathers LP. I've heard a lot of people say Encore before. Honestly, for me, it's just Recovery. Like I really like Recovery. The songs in there are good. They're fun to listen to. Some of the verses in there are really good. Spacebound is probably my favorite Eminem song of all time. My most underrated Eminem song of all time, 25 to Life, is also on Recovery. Although I think, early Eminem stuff, all those albums were pretty good. Outside of Relapse and like half of the Revival album that just came out, every Eminem album is honestly pretty good. What is your underrated ideal playoff match? This video is going up like a week before the regular season ends, so the standings aren't final yet. But what I am hoping for actually is a first-round series between Boston and Miami. And it's really possible. I think right now the Heat are in the 6th seed, but there's a good chance they'll fall to the 7th seed. And if they fall to the 7th seed, then they're likely going to play Boston. So Heat Celtics will be quite entertaining for me to watch, for sure. I think the Heat match up pretty well against the Celtics. The Celtics are going to have to try really, really hard in the first round to play the Heat, especially if they're going to be undermanned. So especially if, the players that they have injured aren't going to be 100% coming back, which is pretty likely. If you're about to get into a fight, which NBA star would you want on your side? If they are healthy, of course. Honestly, Ben Wallace. Ben Wallace or Meta World Peace. It's tough. It's either Ben Wallace or Meta World Peace, honestly. Isn't that so ironic? I want Meta World Peace. I want a guy named Meta World Peace to help me fight. Favorite TV show? I'd probably say Criminal Minds. That's my favorite ongoing TV show. You kind of know what's happening every episode, but it's still fun to watch. A favorite TV show all time that's not ongoing, I'd say Breaking Bad. That show is... If you haven't seen Breaking Bad, you're missing out. Go see Breaking Bad. Okay, so there's two questions here about if you were to relocate a franchise, where would you relocate it to and why? I can't give an answer here without pissing off an entire fan base, but I am going to just piss off an entire fan base. So I'm going to say the New Orleans Pelicans. This is for a couple of reasons. The Pelicans, even back when they had Chris Paul, financially, they were just very unsuccessful. And in fact, that's actually the reason why the Chris Paul Lakers trade never happened, because the Pelicans essentially went bankrupt. It's not exactly what happened, but essentially they were so financially unsuccessful that the NBA had to let their commissioner take over the team, which is why the Chris Paul trade even got vetoed in the first place. So I'd probably say the New Orleans Pelicans, you move it to just Seattle. I mean, Seattle is just the obvious choice, right? It's a big market. The NBA used to have a team there. There's still plenty of Supersonics fans who want their team back. Seattle is just, I think, is the clear-cut #1 choice for any relocation. Do you think players from the 60s are over or underrated given the competition, size of the league pace? I think it's more competitive then, considering the league was smaller. If you condense the current NBA into 8 to 10 teams, that would be insane with every team being stacked. Okay, so I'm going to tackle the last part of that question first. It is not a fair comparison to think about how you could condense the current NBA into 8 to 10 teams, because back in the 60s, there just weren't as many good basketball players because basketball culture wasn't as big as it is now. Nowadays, I mean, with AAU, with NCAA, and how developed the college basketball is, with how developed international basketball is, the talent level in the NBA is simply ridiculous. So that's first of all, I think. But with that being said, do you think players from the 60s are over or underrated? Look, I've always said that it's completely unfair to try to compare players from different eras, especially when you're talking about comparing players from the 60s, which is half a century ago, to players nowadays. Clearly, it's obvious to anyone who has ever tried to watch film of how basketball was played in the 60s, the players in the 60s, for the most part, were not very talented individuals. You might be able to pull a Will Chamberlain or a Bill Russell away from that era and put them in today's era, and yeah, they'd probably still be pretty good. But most of the players, they wouldn't be... They would be G League players in today's NBA, and that's just a fact, right? But with that being said, doesn't mean that they're overrated. We have to compare a player based upon the context of the era that he played in. So how good was he relative to his peers? That's the question. It's not just how good was he. It's how good was he relative to his peers and relative to his competition. That's what we should look at. I think a good analogy for this is, you know, when people say Serena Williams is one of, if not the greatest athlete right now living, they don't mean Serena Williams is the absolute best tennis player, for example, because she's not. Like most men's tennis players who are top 100 in the world would beat her, and they've actually done that before. Serena Williams actually has played a men's tennis player before that was ranked like 100th or 200th in the world, and she lost pretty badly. But it's relative to her competition, right? So relative to women and how dominant she's been in women's tennis, there's a good argument to maybe be made that she is. But I don't think of greatness or evaluating players in an absolute manner. I think it has to be relative to their competition. Out of all the teams tanking right now, Phoenix, Sacramento, Memphis, Dallas, Orlando, Atlanta, Brooklyn, which one do you think will have the best chance of winning a title in 5 years? First of all, I don't think Memphis is actually tanking. I would say the definition of tanking is when a team purposely trades away their most valuable players in order to get higher draft picks to try to land core foundational superstar talent, which Memphis isn't really doing. Phoenix, Sacramento, definitely. Dallas, definitely. Orlando, probably. I mean, I don't know what Orlando is doing. Atlanta, sure. Brooklyn, sure. This is tough. If I had to bet, obviously, I wouldn't bet any of these teams to be winning a title in 5 years. 5 years is not a lot of time for a team to go from zero to hero. If I had to choose who has the best chance, I'm going to say Phoenix. I feel like just on a talent level, Phoenix does have the most amount of talent. Again, like because this is a very rare situation, I'd pick a team that would have at least somewhat of a chance of a lot of their young players blossoming, just taking huge leaps in, let's say, next season or the season after this one. In their game, right? Like Marquise Chris. What if Marquise Chris figures it out? Hey, he probably won't. He'll probably be out of the league in a couple of years. But there's also a chance that he might develop into like a 2010 guy. I mean, you never know. Or Josh Jackson, right? Like Josh Jackson looks like he might just be Justice Winslow, or he might be like Jimmy Butler. I mean, you don't know, right? So, you know, if Josh Jackson, let's say, develops into Jimmy Butler in the next 5 years, then, and you know, some of the other Phoenix players kind of get to like half or 75% of their potential. I mean, sure, like that would be a pretty good team. It's unlikely, but I think Phoenix, just from a talent perspective, I could see that happening. The other teams, I can't possibly see happening. What's the most overrated stat?
Triple doubles.
What's your personal all defensive starting five of all time? Okay, all defense starting five of all time. Point guard, Gary Payton. Shooting guard, Michael Jordan. Small forward, Scottie Pippen. Power forward, Kevin Garnett. Center's tough, man. I want to pay respect to Bill Russell, but I'm going to have to go Hakeem Olajuwon. For or against high school players being able to go directly to the league? I don't see a problem with it. I mean, it's definitely a tricky situation, right? Because if you again allow players to go directly from high school to the NBA, the NCAA is going to suffer a lot from it. Now, obviously, I know a lot of people want to see the NCAA suffer, but I'm talking purely from a realistic standpoint. I mean, they have contracts in term. Like, the NCAA is going to fight very hard for the NBA to not have that, to not allow high school players to go directly into the league. I do think that you will see more and more cases of Emmanuel Mudiay. So if you guys aren't familiar, Emmanuel Mudiay, he went to high school like any normal NBA player, but instead of going to college, he actually went to go to China to play for 1 year. And that was just mostly because of financial reasons, right? Because he wanted to start making money. He wanted to make money for his family as soon as possible. And, he got paid pretty well in China. And he actually, he had some pretty nice performances. He probably learned at least something about being a professional player, which that is also valuable too. So I think you'll see more cases of guys like Mudiay, who decide to go overseas for a year before they go into the NBA, because that's a viable alternative to going to college. From an idealistic standpoint, I think it's fine. High school players go ahead, come into the league. It's not like they go to college to get an education anyways, right? It's not like they go to college and they actually take their classes seriously, because most of them don't. If you get very famous, do you think about doing vlogs? I've thought about doing vlogs, but no, there's the chances of me actually becoming a vlogger are maybe less than 1%. I mean, my life is just not that interesting. Like, it's interesting to me. I mean, I live, for the most part, like a really happy and fulfilled life. But my life is not interesting in the sense that it would be interesting to people on YouTube who want to be entertained, right? I spend a lot of my time writing, doing creative stuff. I spend a lot of my time reading. It's not exactly vlog material right there. But in a couple of months, I do want to actually make a second YouTube channel. It's not going to be about vlogs, but it is going to be about something that's completely unrelated to basketball. My thought about the channel is more so just a channel that talks about ideas. It's going to be a very broad channel, but I'm really looking forward to doing it and kind of sharing some of my perspective on things non-basketball related. All right, that's it for today's Q&A. Thank you to everyone on Twitter who asked me questions. If you want to stay up to date with me, if you want to see some of my daily tweets and retweets, go ahead and make sure to follow me on Twitter. The next Q&A I do will probably be on Instagram, so if that's your thing, go ahead and follow me on Instagram as well. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.